From the very moment Burkina Faso claimed its independence, it carried a heavy burden. One not just of poverty, but of systematic exploitation. First by its colonial master, France, and later by multinational corporations who arrived with contracts, not chains, but chains nonetheless. They promised jobs, investment, and infrastructure. But what they took was far greater. Gold, copper, manganese, hundreds of millions of dollars in raw materials left Burkinabè soil each year. And while Western capitals profited, the villages near the mines remained in the dark. Literally. Captain Ibrahim Traoré knew this. He had studied history, listened to the people, and invoked the legacy of his revolutionary idol, Thomas Sankara, the iconic leader who once said, "He who feeds you, controls you." In the shadow of Sankara's unfinished dream, Traoré launched a campaign unlike anything seen in Burkina Faso's recent history. A mission to reclaim national sovereignty over its natural resources. And it wasn't just words. In 2024, Traoré's government issued a bold directive. 4 mining companies would have their permits revoked, immediately. Among them were Bungu and Wanion, 2 of the richest gold-producing sites in the country. Once operated by British-owned Endeavour Mining, they had been sold off under murky circumstances to Lilium Mining, a firm tied to a U.S. Burkinabè businessman. But Traoré saw through it. He wasn't interested in technicalities or paper trails. For him, this was about justice, historical, economic, and moral. These companies had operated under what many consider exploitative deals, backroom agreements negotiated with previous governments, which offered long-term access to the country's gold in exchange for crumbs. Local communities got little to no share. Most of the profits left the country within minutes of the gold itself. The infrastructure promised never arrived. And the damage to the land? Permanent. So Traoré struck back. He ordered the transfer of these assets to a new state-owned mining company, SOPAMIB, created to ensure that Burkinabè gold would finally benefit the Burkinabè people. But that was only the beginning. In June 2025, his administration went even further. A presidential decree handed over 5 major mining assets, including the Bungu and Wanion mines, along with key exploration licenses, to SOPAMIB. These were no longer private holdings. They were now instruments of national development. Traoré's message to the mining giants of the world was crystal clear. We are no longer open for exploitation. And he didn't stop at gold. He began threatening to review or revoke other licenses held by Western companies. Firms like Endeavour, IAMGold, West African Resources, Nordgold, and Orezone Gold all found themselves in the crosshairs. And as word of Traoré's campaign spread, the stock prices of some of these companies dropped sharply. Investor confidence shook. Boardrooms in London, Toronto, and Paris grew uneasy. What provoked this storm? What had these companies done? They had secured deals that gave them disproportionate control over extraction, production, and export, with minimal reinvestment in local economies. They had failed to deliver on promises to build infrastructure, train local workers, and protect the environment. And they had often bypassed accountability, using offshore structures, political lobbying, and opaque legal loopholes to maximize profits at Burkina Faso's expense. These were not just business missteps. To Traoré, they were betrayals. In speech after speech, he reminded the world that Burkina Faso didn't need outsiders to dig its own soil. "We know how to mine gold," he declared, "and I don't understand why we are going to let multinationals come and do it for us." His critics called it populism. His supporters called it patriotism. But either way, Traoré was acting on a rising tide of frustration that stretched across Africa, a continent rich in resources, yet persistently poor. And it wasn't just about what the companies had done. It was about what they symbolized. They were reminders of a system where the wealth of a nation flowed outward, while poverty and instability remained. Where towns built near billion-dollar mines had no clean water, no healthcare, and no future for their children. Where the gold meant to uplift a nation ended up in foreign vaults, while Burkina Faso begged for loans. So Traore moved to change the rules. The country's mining code was rewritten to prioritize local content, national ownership, and state royalties. Artisanal mining operations were suspended or restructured to curb smuggling. Export regulations were tightened. All of it part of a strategy to turn raw resource extraction into real national development. Still, this transformation hasn't been easy. Western diplomats warned of investor flight. International companies hinted at legal challenges. Some even tried to renegotiate their terms, hoping to salvage a piece of the pie. But for Traoré, compromise has limits. He believes Burkina Faso cannot build its future on the same foundations that kept it in the past. This new era, he insists, must be built by Burkinabè hands for Burkinabè prosperity. And so, the country stands at a crossroads between old contracts and new possibilities, between international pressure and internal resolve. But this story isn't unique to Burkina Faso. It's part of a broader revolution sweeping across the Sahel, where resource-rich countries are standing up to the West. Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, three nations in Africa's Sahel region, remain among the world's poorest in terms of per capita income. Yet beneath their soil lies staggering wealth. These countries are sitting on vast reserves of gold, uranium, oil, and minerals crucial for the world's green energy transition. Mali alone has long been one of Africa's top gold producers. But in recent years, it's added even more to its arsenal: oil, natural gas, and now lithium, the white gold of the 21st century. 2 lithium mines have already opened, putting Mali on the map as a future hub for electric vehicle batteries and renewable energy tech. Niger, famous for its uranium, which powers nuclear plants across Europe, also holds deposits of gold, tin, oil, and phosphates. And Burkina Faso? Despite decades of underdevelopment, it's one of the continent's largest gold exporters, with additional reserves of copper, manganese, zinc, and more. But it's not just their geology that's shifting, it's their politics. Since 2020, all 3 nations have undergone military coups, severing ties with Western allies and institutions. In response, the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, hit back with sanctions and suspensions. But the military leaders in these countries made their position clear. They're done with what they see as neo-colonial control. They walked out of ECOWAS, calling it a puppet of Western influence. In its place, they forged a new alliance, the Alliance of Sahel States, or AES. Their goal? Full economic independence, a new chapter of sovereignty, and a realignment of global partnerships. For decades, African nations exported raw materials under terms that were never theirs to dictate. Prices were set overseas, contracts were one-sided, and the infrastructure needed to add value at home was deliberately underfunded or ignored. That era, they say, is over. Now, the Sahel is pivoting toward powers that offer different deals and fewer conditions. Countries like China, Russia, Turkey, and even North Korea have stepped into the vacuum left by the West. And China is moving fast. In Mali's south, the Goulamina lithium mine, one of the biggest in all of Africa, has just gone online. Over the next 2 decades, this single mine will produce 500,000 tons of spodumene concentrate every year. That's a key source of lithium for electric vehicle batteries, solar storage units, and the global energy transition. The mine is being developed by China's Ganfeng Lithium, one of the world's biggest lithium players. Mali's government secured a 30% stake in the project, with another 5% going to local investors. Still, Ganfeng retains a 65% majority. But unlike previous deals with Western companies, the Malian government is pushing for stronger national participation. Under a 2023 mining law, at least 51% of supply contracts tied to major mineral projects must go to Malian companies. And a significant chunk of the mine's profits is earmarked for local infrastructure, roads, schools, health clinics, meant to directly benefit surrounding communities. Annual revenues from the Goulamina mine alone are expected to exceed 150 million euros. It's more than just a cash windfall. it's a test case for a new model of African development, one where control over resources and revenue doesn't flow outward but stays at home. The country's military leadership has framed this mine not just as an investment, but as a turning point. A symbol of strategic and sincere partnership, forged not through centuries of exploitation, but through modern alignment and mutual benefit. And while many in the West debate whether Africa is turning eastward, leaders on the ground are already moving. They've seen how Chinese companies, unburdened by political conditions, move fast and sign large-scale deals. They've seen how Europe still relies on African uranium while condemning the very regimes it buys from. And they've watched as lithium, the mineral that will shape the next energy era, gets locked up in foreign hands unless new frameworks are built. What's unfolding in the Sahel is far more than a geopolitical shift. It's a resource revolution. One that could redraw the map of global supply chains, rewire old power dynamics, and redefine who gets to benefit from Africa's natural wealth. The Sahel's pivot is part of a larger pattern unfolding across the African continent. Chinese and Russian mining projects aren't just popping up in Mali, Niger, or Burkina Faso. They're spreading from the deserts of the Sahel to the rainforests of Central Africa and beyond. In June 2024, Niger delivered a stunning blow to its former colonial partner. The government revoked the license of French nuclear giant Orano to operate the Imuraran uranium mine, one of the largest of its kind anywhere on Earth. This single mine had once supplied nearly 10% of France's nuclear fuel needs and a quarter of Western Europe's. And it might not be the last. Niger's authorities are also considering pulling the plug on Somaïr, another major uranium site near Agadez, operated by the same French firm. Why? Because the ground beneath Niger has long powered European cities, but the profits have rarely lit up Nigerian homes. Since the 2023 military coup, uranium exports from Niger have been severely restricted. With landlocked borders and political sanctions, there's only one route out: the port of Cotonou in Benin. But that port, licensed for uranium shipments, is now closed to Nigerian products. ECOWAS sanctions, fueled by the country's withdrawal from the bloc, have essentially frozen the flow of one of Africa's most strategic minerals. And Burkina Faso is taking similar action. President Ibrahim Traoré, young, defiant, and openly critical of Western dominance, has warned that foreign companies will no longer have free rein to extract his country's resources. In August 2024, his government expropriated two major gold mines, Boungou and Wahnion, previously operated by British firm Endeavour Mining. The message was clear: Burkina Faso's resources must now benefit Burkinabè people first. It's a pattern echoed across the region, a reclaiming of sovereignty, an effort to take control of what has always been theirs. But what does this mean for the West? Some say the door is closing. Others argue it's still ajar. Despite growing ties with China, Russia, and other non-Western partners, many leaders in the Sahel aren't looking to cut all ties with Europe. They just want a new kind of relationship. One based on equality, not dependency. On shared gain, not exploitation. There are still threads connecting these nations to Europe. Shared languages, cultural legacies, educational systems, and deep familial ties. These aren't easily severed. And in some corners, quiet cooperation continues. The European Union, for example, has quietly extended its police training mission in Mali, UCAP Sahel, for another 2 years. And while the headlines scream rupture, behind the scenes, diplomatic visits and low-profile partnerships persist. Leaders in the Sahel are beginning to understand a nuanced truth. Turning away from the West doesn't mean turning your back on opportunity. It means choosing the terms, building leverage, reshaping the narrative of who Africa trades with and why. But beneath all these shifts, beneath the geopolitics and the mining contracts, lies a deeper, more troubling question. Why is a continent so rich in diamonds, gold, uranium, and lithium still home to some of the world's poorest people? Why, after centuries of extraction, do African nations remain exporters of raw materials rather than producers of finished goods? Why are roads still unpaved near billion-dollar mines? Why are schools crumbling while gold bars leave by the ton? The answer lies not just in the contracts or the coups, but in a system that was never built to make Africa rich. A system where wealth flows outward, where value is added elsewhere, and where, until now, African voices had little say in how their own resources were used. But that's changing. From the red dust of Mali to the uranium fields of Niger and the gold veins of Burkina Faso, a new generation of leaders and citizens is demanding more. More control, more value, more dignity. The world is entering an energy transition. Lithium, uranium, gold, and rare earths are no longer just commodities, they're power, and Africa has them. But this time, will Africa write the rules? Or will history repeat itself, under a different flag, with a different face? That's the question the world must now reckon with.